This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 534 for October 12th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, the new Ethical Slut. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx, and we have a fantastic interview for you today with Janet Hardy, co-author of The Ethical Slut, which has just come out with its third edition. Huzzah! Well, that's going to be a lot of fun. And just one thing to bring to your attention before we get there.
Are you planning on opening up your relationship? The University of Utah Relationship Decisions Lab is looking for participants in monogamous relationships who are currently considering opening up their relationship to take a survey. We are looking for individuals who have never opened up and individuals who have opened up in the past but are currently with one partner and are planning on opening up again. This study will examine how people choose to open their relationships and what their experiences of this relationship transition look like. If you or anyone you know fits our qualifications, we invite you to take our survey. You can find our survey at www.relationshipdecisions.org. Once there, click on the Participants tab and then on the Open Relationship Project link. Not only will you be furthering science, but you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Again, the link is www.relationshipdecisions.org. Click on the Participants tab and the Open Relationship Project link.
And if you missed that link, we will provide that in the show notes at polyweekly.com, or if you're listening to us through a podcast app, it'll be available in the podcast notes. You can click it directly from the show notes. And let's see if we can help them out with that project. Sounds like a lot of fun. I am so excited to welcome back to the Polyweekly Studios, Janet Hardy, co-author of The Ethical Slut. Welcome back.
Happy to be here.
I'm trying to remember the last time you were on the show. I can't even remember.
I think it was the time that you were here in Eugene, remember? And we did a live taping in front of an audience.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. We had some really interesting trans people
yes.
that gave me information I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a good group of people. And I think that was maybe 2 years ago, thereabouts. It's been a while.
Facebook has been sent me reminders this summer, and I think it was relive this memory from 2 years ago. I think you're right.
Okay.
For those poly folks who may have been hiding under a rock for the last, 10 or 20 years, why don't you let our audience know who you are and what you do?
All right. I'm Janet, and I am the author or co-author of 12 different books about alternative sexualities, the best known of which is The Ethical Slut, which just went into its 20th anniversary third edition last month. Yeah, I've been doing this for a while. I live in Eugene with my spouse and pets, and I am an author and editor and speaker and working on becoming an illustrator. So
oh, really? That's
yep.
news to me.
Yep, that's my new thing, is I've been reawakening some skills in art that I have not messed around with for a very long time. And it's all coming back to me pretty quickly, and I'm having a blast doing it because I was sort of running out of things to say in words, so now I get to say them in pictures instead.
So are you looking at illustrating some of the alternative sexuality type books that you have been writing and editing of that sort, or something else entirely?
Well, both. Right now I'm working on a new edition of my oldest book, The Sexually Dominant Woman, a workbook for nervous beginners, which I wrote back in 1992. But I'm completely redoing it from the ground up with sort of a comic book format. It's going to be a little 6x6 book, heavily illustrated and kind of humorous and a lot of fun. It's for
Fun.
women. Yeah, for women who are really just dipping a toe into domination for the first time. So a lot of sort of cheerleading and hand-holding and some basic information that they need in order to move forward.
Interesting. And you said you were working to illustrate these alternative sexuality type books, but also something else too. What is the other thing?
My sons, who are both adults at this point, my older one will turn 40 later this year, we're talking about doing a book together. They both also write and draw. And we've been talking about doing a book about what it was like back when I was a young mom first coming out into poly and kink, and they were kind of growing up with, we grew up together doing a lot of that stuff. And we haven't quite figured out what angle to take on it yet, but that's what we want to do. Tentatively called Slut and Sons.
I love it.
Uh-huh.
That is really exciting. So it would be about polyfamilies, first and second generation polyfamilies.
Exactly so.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah, we don't hear much from the children of people who are kinky or poly or sexually weird in whatever way we're weird. Mostly because a lot of the people who are doing that either don't have kids or are still young enough that their kids are not safe to speak up for themselves. But I'm one of the sort of next or older generation poly people. My kids are grown enough that they can make independent decisions without worrying about a creepy power dynamic. And so we're in kind of a unique position to move forward on this. It's just a matter of figuring out what we want to say and making time to say it.
Can't wait for that book.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm really excited by it too, but we're just not, we haven't quite found the way into it yet. We will. We're all smart people.
I'm waiting on the edge of my seat for that one. I suppose we should probably talk about Ethical Slut 3, which was the
it's the approximate reason for the interview.
My excuse to chat with you again. By the way, Lusty Guy says hi.
Back at him.
Yeah, he's on a dive right now, so he's underwater. So he couldn't be here. Yes.
Yes, well, that's a good excuse because we would just get glub, glub, glub. So Ethical Slut 3, yes.
Ethical Slut 3, I'm not quite sure where to start. I kind of want to start with that amazing article of the coverage of you and your book and Dossie Easton, I should say.
Yes.
Let's give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
That coverage in Rolling Stone
wasn't that
fucking
awesome?
Amazing. How did you make that happen?
I think actually the folks at 10 Speed were the ones who made it happen. So I don't know exactly how it went down, but they contacted us and wanted to write an article about how poly has changed over the last 20 years, which I thought was a really excellent angle to take on this because it really isn't the same as it was when I first started talking about this back in 1997. It's changed a lot. And they wanted to talk about that and some of the changes that we'd seen. So that was a lot of fun and, as you say, amazing coverage. They really did a very unbiased, uncondemning, realistic and positive look at what we are and what we do.
I think it's some of the best coverage we've gotten that I've ever seen, truly.
Yeah. Knock wood. Here's hoping for lots more of it. I've been getting a lot of calls for interviews and podcasts and so on since the new book came out. So it's we will hope for plenty of good coverage.
Well, thank you for making time for this one.
Oh, sure.
So let me ride on Rolling Stone's coattails and ask, how has poly changed over the last 20 years?
Well, as I told them, when we first had the book come out, well, actually, a funny story about that. When the book first came out in 97, there used to be a little publication called Wireless News Flash. And what it was a daily thing where they would send a little one-paragraph squib, a bunch of them, about different speakers and writers and people who would be interesting to have on the radio. And they would send do a fax blast to all the radio stations. So we got a call from...
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That old. So we got a call from Wireless Flash. They wanted to do an interview, which was great. And it was a young woman who was doing the interview. We were on the phone with her. And she asked at some point, and she was very tactful about this, more than it's going to sound like. What she was trying to say was, well, that's very well for old broads like you. But if you're a young woman and you're sleeping around, you're going to get a reputation. How do you deal with that? And we said, well, if that's happening, then you're probably fishing in the wrong pond. You want to go find people at Ren Fair, people at science fiction cons, that people who are not satisfied with the world the way it is and who want to make different worlds. That's where you're going to find like-minded people who are not going to judge you for being a huge slut. And so the article comes out the next morning, and it's headlined, "Nerds Geeks Make Best Lovers, Say Ethical Slut Duo." And our phones fucking rang off the hook for weeks. It's very possible that the reason we're sitting here right now talking about this book is because of that article, because it really launched the publicity on the very first Ethical Slut. But that's also, it's a point of view about what our audiences were back then. I used to get calls from TV producers, Jerry Springer or that, and they wanted to know if I could refer them to a poly family that were not either old hippies or enormous screaming geeks. And I would say, well,
good luck with that.
Yeah, no, I can't, because that's the contents of my personal Rolodex is old hippies and big geeks. And 2, that's who's doing poly. But that's different now. I've done a couple of talks now at the Poly Apartment House in Brooklyn, and the people who come to those, they're all young professionals, well-dressed, obviously well into the mainstream, and just doing poly because it is possible to be in the mainstream and do poly and not have to hide it these days. And it wasn't in 1997. You would have lost your job. I did lose my job.
Oh, I didn't know that story. You lost your job?
Yeah. I was an advertising copywriter for the first 10 years of my adult life. And I was working at an ad agency in the Silicon Valley, and I don't know for sure that they were listening in on my personal phone calls, but let's just say there was evidence that they might be listening in on my personal phone calls, and they fired me.
Wow.
They did not want people like me working there. It used to be that, and to some degree it still is. It would be inadvisable if you were like a preschool teacher or someone who works with elders. There are jobs, you don't get to be a highly placed politician and be out as poly. Mm-hmm. So there are still people who have to be in the closet, just many fewer of them. You can be like a young banker on the upwards climb in your career and be poly, and it's all fine these days. That did not used to be the case. So our audiences have changed tremendously in that 20 years.
I've seen that as well, definitely. I remember the first poly event that I went to was a camping event, of course. It was always camping events back in the day, right?
Yes.
And it was a bunch of fabulous aging hippies out in the middle of Indiana somewhere. And I remember there was this couple that I met there, and we kind of glommed onto each other because I remember her saying, I'm a mortgage broker. I just want somebody normal. I just want to meet somebody doing poly who has a normal job, who isn't a shaman or, when you ask what you do, you're like, they say, I'll adjust your aura. Not that there's anything wrong with adjusting auras or shamans. Kudos, props out to my pagan friends there.
Let's have a real estate agent in here somewhere,
exactly.
Maybe. And
Exactly. I remember that conversation, and now there are.
I sort of miss our old audiences of misfits and weirdos, but I think it's awesome that you get to be a young, successful stockbroker or whatnot and be poly and not have to be terrified.
Well, as long as we still get to be misfits and weirdos, I'm okay with that.
Yes. Someone has to hold down that end of the bell curve. Absolutely.
What other changes in terms of poly acceptance have you seen over the years?
Simply the word. I mean, I always used to have to explain what poly meant. Or polyamory meant when I was talking to straight people. And these days, most people are very aware of what poly is. It's been a while since I've had to explain it to anybody.
Really?
So that's a huge, yeah. The cover of Newsweek, that's actually the biggest surge in publicity we got in all this time was behind Newt Gingrich. You remember when it hit the news that he had asked his wife for an open relationship? That was when we had the article in the New York Times. Thank you, Newt, for being the reprehensible, horrible asshole that you are. At least you sold me a few books, Newt, wherever you are. A lot less judgment. I mean, there's still, you look at the comment section on that Rolling Stone piece, there's still people who think the whole thing is disgusting, but many fewer.
Oh, well, never read the comments.
Yeah. Well, apparently the main problem is that Dossie and I are too old and ugly to write books about sex. That seems to be you know how it is. How dare we talk about sex when we're not pretty?
Yeah, whatever.
So yeah, there's still some judgment out there, but not nearly at the level that there was 20 years ago.
I still can't believe it's been 20 years since Ethical Slut came out. That is astounding to me.
Yeah, there's going to be people reading this edition who have never lived on a planet where Ethical Slut has not been in print.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
I suppose we should actually talk about the actual book.
Yes.
What is different in this third edition of Ethical Slut 3?
Well, it's purple. It's purple instead of orange on the cover. That's how you can tell which one you're looking at. And it's fatter. Rather than doing a lot of tweaking to what was already there, because we were pretty pleased with what was already there. We did tweak some of the language around gender because things have happened so quickly in that area. But other than that, we didn't do a lot to the core text. Instead, we embellished it. We added sidebars about poly pioneers or aspects of poly that we thought were interesting but didn't fit easily into the flow of the text. We added a new chapter on consent culture. We expanded the partner finding chapter because that strategy has changed a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Even in the 7 years since the last edition. We just wanted it to be like a burrito deluxe. We wanted it to have sour cream and guacamole in it. But we didn't want to change the basic burrito. Because who wants to change a burrito? Burritos are excellent. So that was kind of our approach, was just to make it fatter and richer and with more depth.
That sounds very wise, because if you ask me, like, how would you change Ethical Slut? I agree with you. It was perfect the way it was. And I suppose there are always some updates. There are. Especially with the more active trans movement that's really just exploded in the last couple of years. That's very important.
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked to go through it and notice how many generalizations we had made about men and women that were not supportable in terms of current thinking about gender. So like when we were writing about safer sex, instead of saying, if you're a woman who has sex with a man, we had to sort of think it through and say, well, if you're a person who has a uterus and you're having sex with people who have testicles, because, that might or might not add up to woman or man. But that's all changed so radically and so quickly that we wanted to accommodate it. Thinking about about consent has changed radically since the last edition. I mean, we've always been in favor of consent. Who isn't in favor of consent? But we wanted to talk about it in greater depth because problems with consent are one of the things that'll kill a poly community faster than anything else. So we wanted to get real clear on that.
Yeah, that's definitely been an issue as the poly and BDSM and other all types of alternative sexual communities have really been exploding in the last few years. Yeah. I have thought and talked more about consent than in the last 3 years than I think I had in the entire time before. Why do you suppose that is?
I think pendulums swing. And in my lifetime, I've seen it go back and forth a couple of times between assuming the worst of any given encounter in terms of consent and not assuming the worst. And right now, we're really at the far end of assuming the worst, that if consent is dubious or incomplete or not explicit in any given interaction, then there's a problem. And I think that's a little jejune, and I think it will probably start to swing back pretty soon as people recognize that that's not terribly nuanced thinking and is not a terribly good fit for the way people actually have sex. But the way it is right now, everybody is having to seriously question their approach to sexuality about whether it lives up to current standards of consent. And that's requiring some radical thinking. And I think we'll be glad at the end of it all that we've thought it through so much, because we have to if we're going to get to something that is more accommodating and more nuanced. You have to think it through all the way to its extremes, which is where we are right now. But I don't think it's where we're going to end up.
It's been interesting for me thinking about consent so much, not just in terms of sexuality either, but in terms of so many other things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I haven't talked about it too much on the podcast, but I just moved in with Lusty Guy and Elle. And so we're collaborating on a lot of things. So now instead of living alone, now every time I want to do something or move something or play something somewhere, I'm checking in with consent. Yeah. And it's funny because I never really thought about that as consent before, but I realized going deep into consent culture that there are so many things in life and in the past that I hadn't checked in on, that it's probably a really good idea to check in on, not just sexually, but in the workplace and at home and everywhere.
Yeah. Is it okay if I move this bookshelf across the room? Yeah, we go through that in this household as well. My previous live-in partners have all been heterosexual men. My spouse now is bi and genderqueer and a former drag queen. And whereas my previous partners did not care if I wanted to paint the room lavender, a former drag queen is going to care very deeply whether I paint the room lavender. And so there has to be a lot more checking in that regard. And we've had some mishaps along the way of that, me trying to learn to be less presumptuous in what I do with our environment. It's never mattered before, and it's a hard habit to break.
I would love to ask you an incredibly selfish question right now.
Sure.
I know that you're a theater geek like me, and you're a musical theater geek like me, so you have to tell me, what's your favorite musical?
Pacific Overtures.
I don't even know that. Pacific Overtures.
Oh, if you ever get a chance. It's very rarely performed because it's Sondheim at his most sort of intellectual and abstruse, and because it requires an all-Asian cast. It's a musical about the westernization of Japan, and it is so freaking brilliant, makes you utterly got to at least listen to the cast album.
Oh my God, I love Sondheim, and we could totally put that on here in Seattle. Hello.
Yes, you do have enough Asian actors there. We don't here in Eugene. So yeah, there was a production of it in Chicago. I don't know if it's still running, a John Doyle production, but it's only been produced 2 or 3 times since I first saw it in San Francisco in what would have been maybe 1985.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was what first made me fall in love with Sondheim, which is, still in love with Sondheim, will always be in love with Sondheim.
Well, I'm kind of more traditional. Into the Woods made me fall in love with Sondheim.
I love Into the Woods too.
How can you not love it?
Yeah. And Sweeney Todd, fabulous. A Little Night Music. They're all wonderful in different ways, but they're not easy to produce, so you don't see them on stage all that often.
Indeed.
My older son is an actor and puppeteer down in Los Angeles, and I think Follies would adapt brilliantly to some high-end puppetry. And I've been, right? I've been trying to put a bug in his ear about his home theater company doing a production of Follies, but so far I'm not hearing that it's gone anywhere.
Such a shame.
Such a shame.
Well, our time together is almost over, so is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish that I had?
Yeah, I buy the book.
There you go.
It should be available in everybody's local bookstores. It's certainly available both in ebook and paper form on all the book selling websites. So far, the audiobook is still the 2nd edition, but there is an audiobook, and one of these days we'll get around to doing an audiobook of the 3rd edition, but there's some legal stuff that has to get straightened out first. But the audiobook is Dacia and me reading, so it's the author's voices doing the audiobook.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Where's the best place for us to buy the book?
If you go through my author website, my professional Facebook page, which is Janet W. Hardy. My personal one is Janet Hardy, and my professional is Janet W. Hardy. That's how you can tell the difference. Or it's J. Hardy Author, I think, is where it goes in the URL. If you go through that and you click on the Buy the Product tab, that goes directly to the Random House website, and I get a bigger cut of it that way.
Oh, nice. I like to ask that because sometimes it makes a really big difference.
Sometimes it does. What's actually best for me is if you wait until I'm in town and come hear me talk and buy it from me directly. But I can only be so many places at once.
And we will provide links to purchase the book in the show notes. And since you mentioned that you're traveling, where are you speaking next? Or we can come and get a copy of the book from you directly.
Actually, nothing is lined up right now. I had a really busy summer where I was just doing a lot of traveling and speaking. And so nothing has... There's been some talk of a thing in Sacramento, but we don't have that lined up yet. And so through the end of the year, I'm pretty much twiddling my thumbs. But if anybody wants me to come talk in their town, reach me through the website and I'll tell you what I need to make that happen.
And the website is?
JanetWHardy.com.
Janet, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to hang out with you. Thank you so much for making the time to chat with us today.
Oh, I loved it. All right, I will talk to you soon.
It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly polyamorists everywhere. This week's Happy Poly Moment is from Sarah, who wrote in and said, I stumbled upon polyweekly about 2 weeks ago when I was searching for help with my jealousy issues. I've been pouring through episodes. I'm in the process of owning more and more of my shit, and things for me are really improving. I love it. Only 2 weeks, and already she's owning her shit. I wanted to share my happy poly moment. I was having an off day today and had told both my partners that I was feeling very blah. During their regular communication with each other, they spoke about my dinner, and my girlfriend A told my husband D that she was making chili for her family. D told A that I really like chili, but I never make it because he doesn't really care for it. Through their conversation, they arranged for D to get an item from the store that A needed for D to bring me home a bowl of chili. My heart exploded with the joy that they were communicating together and that D was providing an act of service, his love language, for his metamour, and that they were joining forces to do something thoughtful for me. It made my day. Well, Sarah, that made my day. That sounds absolutely lovely. And I am thrilled to welcome Meiyi to the polyweekly Playmates. Thank you for subscribing and helping to support our bandwidth and travel costs. And thanks again to Janet for taking the time to chat with us today, and to all of you for listening, because even if you never donate or contribute in any other way, just listening is a gift to us, because it tells us that the content we're producing is helpful in some way, and that's really all we want to be. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, email polyweekly@gmail.com. If you'd like to book us for something or have a business proposition, lustyguy@polyweekly.com. You can also just call the comment line with your questions or comments at 802-505-POLY. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.